자, 다음은 이제 독립적인 읽기에 대해서 한번 옮겨가 볼게요. 읽기 능력은 말하기 능력처럼 인간 뇌에 딱 태어날 때부터 갖춘 게 아니라고 이제 방금 또 말씀하셨고 또 책에도 쓰셨는데요. 그래서 우리가 배우고 연습해서 읽기 회로를 만들어야 된다고 하셨어요. 이게 굉장히 많은 사람들한테 획기적인 주장이었다고 생각해요. 저도 그렇고요. 예. 뇌에서 읽기 회로가 만들어지는 과정에 대해서 좀 설명해 주시겠어요?
I have a little story to tell you. When I wrote that book, I had always these bookstore visits, and I
음.
went to the Harvard bookstore,
음.
and the manager came out to introduce me, and he said, "The first line of Proust and the Squid, we were
음.
never born to read." He said it was like Beethoven's chord in the Fifth Symphony. I laughed out loud. No one had ever said that, but it's actually, very similar to what you felt.
음.
It is a complete epiphany
음.
to an insight. Oh my gosh, it's not natural. The brain does not have a single one region for reading. It doesn't have, we don't possess genes like for language that all we have to do is put a child in an environment with speakers and they will speak over time. They will learn, the genes unfold. Reading is a cultural invention. Now, what the brain does have, which is amazing, almost miraculous, is that when we invent new things, we have the capacity to make new connections among the parts of the brain. So the circuit is learning how to build new neuronal connections between different parts of the brain. So remember what I said, 0 to 5 is the beginning of the parts development, not the connecting yet, not yet,
Uh-huh. I see.
but it's developing the parts. So language is developing, conceptual development is happening, background knowledge, affective development. We are learning when we hear a story about two little animals who are lost and they find each other and they help each other. We're learning to put feelings together, but we haven't put it all together. Because reading is not natural, what we do as the human beings who teach is we develop each part in the 0 to 5 period. And we develop a very basic concept of what a book is.
Mhm.
But we do not force the brain to connect vision. Now remember, we've got all these areas, vision, all these different language processes, all these cognitive processes, all these areas have to learn to be connected. That's what happens when we start putting letters and sounds together. Now, I have to give a greatest compliment, you will be surprised, to King Sejong. Yes, because Hangul, the Korean writing system, is so, in so
킹세죠.
many ways, so much better than other writing systems because and remember, you might even not know this. Your viewers might not know that in his manual, he said he wanted to create a writing system that everybody could learn, even women.
Yeah, yeah, I know. We memorized it. We have to memorize all his,
Yes,
writings, King
yes.
Sejong. So I know that. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
was so shocked when I
Yeah.
read this, but I was so proud that
Yeah.
centuries ago, this very visionary man, this
Mm.
king,
Mhm.
understood that reading is so important
Important. Yeah.
to all his people. And when I watch Korean drama series like in the
Mhm.
Joseon Dynasty and everything,
Mhm.
what I'm always interested in is some of the programs that show women
음.
learning,
Mhm.
medicine,
Mhm.
or learning to become a scholar, even if they have to disguise themselves.
Mhm.
I'm seeing this long history of teaching everyone, and that comes back to the reading brain circuit.
음.
Hangul, the Korean writing system is more regular and easier to learn than English by
네.
far. And so the circuit in Korean is actually, I would say, easier to first learn.
Mhm.
But then it's the same as any, whether it's a syllabary like in Chinese and Japanese, or a logosyllabary like in Chinese, doesn't matter. Alphabet, syllabary,
Mhm.
logosyllabary. You have to learn to then connect the symbol, the visual symbol, with the language system, but the many different parts of the language system, the meaning, semantic,
Mhm.
the meanings of the words, how the word is used in grammar, how the word has, and this is especially in some languages, uh, the morpheme parts. You are learning them. And you are learning that, all that to put with the visual. So the circuit is not natural, it has to be learned. And this is the role of teachers. Teachers everywhere have to know this. And they don't know it in the United States as many as, I mean, we are teaching the science to everyone, but it's as important in Korea as the United States, as in Italy, as in Israel, as in India. Everywhere has to know it is not natural, it is to be taught. Now, a lot of children, because they get all this background, like what you're doing in Book Start,
Mhm.
you are giving them so much that it's an easier thing to build that circuit. It's easier because they're prepared, they know what a book is. But think about children in poverty. They do not have the parts ready to be connected. And so we have to really think, and I say this to Book Start, we have to make sure that our youngest children who come from families of poverty are really given more books young. And in the United States, we are trying to help people give books to communities, to doctors, to give away so that all children before 5 have a concept that that is helping them when they're 5 and 6 learn to make that circuit connected. And then over time, Yunhan, as you know from my last book, Reader Come Home, you connect to all the deep reading processes. And that circuit moves from the tiniest basic one when they're first beginning to this beautifully elaborated circuit that is who we are.
난독증이나 언어 장애를 가진 사람들이 있어요. 그런 아이들도 있고 부모들도 있고요. 이들은 읽기 회로를 만드는 데 어려움을 갖거나 아니면 다른 읽기 회로를 갖게 되잖아요. 이들을 위해서 학교나 가정 또 사회는 무엇을 할 수 있을까요?
Yunha, if you look behind me, you will see a beautiful painting. The painting is one of so many by my son who is dyslexic. And I say that because the first thing I want people around the world to know is that about 5 to 10% of all the brains in the world, whatever the writing system, doesn't matter,
Mhm.
they have a different organization of their brain that gives them strengths and advantages,
음.
especially in visual pattern, in art, in architecture, in entrepreneurship,
음.
because they think differently. So the first thing that I want people to understand, it has nothing to do with intelligence.
Mhm.
These are sometimes some of our most intelligent individuals. But the educational system has not been set up to teach them. So we have, in many places, failed to understand that children with dyslexia have all these strengths, but they are children. They do not know
No. Mhm.
that they aren't dumb because they look at all the other kids who suddenly can read. And in Korea, it's going to be even more obvious to them because Korean is easier to acquire.
That's
So
right.
they
That's
are
true.
going to have even more emotional disconnect. I thought I was smart. I thought I was like everybody else. And now they can do something I can't. So the first thing is that Korea as a culture has to make sure that dyslexia is understood as having nothing to do with intelligence, but everything to do with learning how to teach that brain to give more exposures to the letter patterns, the connections between the letters, the characters in Hangul, the characters and the sounds of the words and the meaning of the words.
Mhm.
So they will need more time and more, I use the word exposure, but
Mhm.
a teacher would use the word practice. Now, here's going to be something interesting, and it would seem different from what I've been saying about digital devices. Digital games can help practice for teachers who have all these children that they have to help. The best help can be when a teacher works with 4 kids who are struggling because
Mhm.
that gives them a sense of a group. That
Mhm.
gives them a sense they are not alone.
Mhm.
That gives them a chance to learn the material in more, if you will, in more practice times.
Mhm.
So, one of the suggestions that I make is that they have to be sure to use intervention instruction that is systematic, explicit. Now,
Mhm.
I don't know in Korea. I need to really have a visit to Korea.
Oh, please, please.
I
I
would
will invite you.
I loved my one visit when Proust and the Squid had a book tour in Korea.
Oh,
I
see.
loved it. It was so exciting for me. But that was years ago, and I never went to schools. And what I want to see is whether or not the schools are using instruction that is based on just the child being exposed to books and literature and not giving explicit teaching of how the characters go with the sounds. That's really important in dyslexia.
Mhm.
Books are important to
Mhm.
read to them in the beginning, and books are important with the most decodable text, the easiest text. So they are never not reading, but they are reading at their pace and they will learn to read.
Mhm.
But in Korea, because the writing system is easier, what is the most prevalent difficulty is the speed,
That's
the
right.
automaticity, so that they can learn, but it's still so slow that they can't add the comprehension in the same way. So we have to work on getting that or those early parts of the circuit fast enough, but never neglecting their oral language because remember they are very intelligent. So we read aloud to them. We
Mm.
give them audio books. We give them practice on word games, but we keep it going so that by the time they are around 4th grade, they are much more fluent and able to learn when the material gets harder. And that's really important because 4th grade teachers on don't know about children with dyslexia.
Mhm.
This is true around the world.
Mm.
That 4th grade teacher assumes
Assume,
that
yeah.
child knows how to read. And therefore, at that point, many children with dyslexia actually drop out in their mind. They can't do it as fast, they can't do the work. People say they're lazy or not working to potential because they see how smart they are. So, emotional and behavioral issues come into the child's life and they feel frustrated. and a lot of dropouts in high school, a lot of kids who could have become inventors. Look at how so many of our greatest inventors, including Leonardo da Vinci, have a childhood history of dyslexia. We lose some of our greatest minds
Mm,
if we do not go in there with patience, with systematic teaching, and never giving up.
mm.
Persistence, never giving up, and helping them always know their brain is a beautiful brain, but it's differently wired to give the species its gifts later.
Yeah, yeah. We Korea have just started systematic, some education for
Good.
dyslexia, but
Yes,
still, I think it's not enough.
yes,
Just
it's
starting.
very
Yeah.
important. We
Mm-hmm.
have to. If I come to Korea, I will give a very, a very strong talk on
Yes, please.
to do about dyslexia because it's 5 to 10% in Korea. It's not about the some people laugh when I say dyslexia is not a reading disability.
No.
Dyslexia is a different organization of the brain
Mm-hmm.
that has all these strengths but
Mm-hmm.
has a different way of processing written language. And we, as the educators, have to learn how to teach that brain.
Yeah,
It's
that's
not
our
them.
responsibility. Yeah,
It's not them. It's us.
that's right.
And we
That's
need
right.
to release that potential. I mean, that boy, that man who painted this, some of the pictures now are absolutely extraordinary. If he had been born into a family, a typical family, he might be a criminal
Oh
because
no.
he's so smart. And the reason why I say that, he could forge any signature. It's so funny.
Oh,
My one son is dysgraphic. His
I see.
handwriting
He
is
can't. Mm.
he can't handwrite. And the other one is able to copy anybody's signature. I make a joke out of it, but there's a very serious part. I
Mm.
also work in California with a movement on juvenile delinquency.
Mm.
And we see so many of our youth who were never diagnosed and never were literate. And they are more susceptible to, they give up. And
Mhm.
so they become vulnerable to gangs and to a life of delinquency. And so we're trying to change the court system so that those young people, and usually boys, but not always, they get a second chance. They get a
Mhm.
diagnosis. And if they are, in fact, as we know, there are 40 to 60% of people in US prisons who are functionally illiterate.
Literate. Mm.
Illiterate.
Literate.
And we have to know as a society we can do better.
Mhm. Yeah.
It's social justice.
Mhm. That's right.
Literacy is social justice, and
Mhm.
it begins in infancy.
Yeah, from very beginning. Yeah. 우리가 종이책을 읽을 때의 읽기 회로랑 디지털 기기를 읽을 때의 읽기 회로는 어떻게 다른지 궁금합니다. 다시 책으로에서는 양손잡이 독자를 제안을 하셨어요. 제가 그 부분을 읽으면서 정말 맞아, 맞아 하면서 읽었어요. 완전히 눈이 번쩍 뜨이고 대안을 찾은 그런 느낌이었거든요. 우리가 양손잡이 독자가 되기 위해서 또 양손잡이 독자로 잘 살기 위해서 좋은 방법들이 뭐가 있을까요?
This is a very important question for everyone,
Mhm.
for every mother or mother to be. And I will laughingly say I just heard that two of the people that introduced me to K drama, Hyun Bin and Son Ye Jin, are going to have a baby.
Oh, yes.
I tell everyone, and I hope they hear this, from the minute that infancy is happening, we are to give print
Mm,
to our children
mm,
first. And the biliterate brain, for me, begins with an introduction to the world of books through
First.
print. Now, That does not mean there should be no technology, but there should be very little for the biliterate brain. Now, the biliterate brain I look at in a way like Vygotsky. Many of your educators have studied Lev Vygotsky, and he talked about parallel growth of language and conceptual development.
Mm.
Similarly, I think there should be the development of print from infancy all the way to around 10. At the same time, a little digital until about 5. And then the use of digital in complementary ways that complement but that are never dominant in terms of reading. Rather, they are dominant in terms of teaching coding, programming. There's a beautiful school, Reggio Emilia in Italy, in which they are showing some of the best uses of technology, even for our young children, and how to be digitally wise, not to be susceptible to misinformation and disinformation. But part of the wisdom in digital is begun in print by building a reading brain that is capable, and this is where we'll get to the other part of your question, what are the differences in the circuitry? The circuit of an adult is the same. How it's used is different. And that's really important. We don't necessarily have children who are learning to be deep readers if they begin with digital devices as the way they're learning to read. This is it's a tough point to understand, but learning to read print slows the brain's processing down in such a way that you are gradually learning to infer, understand the perspective of another. This is the growth of empathy. That books start, learning about empathy is not only in books later. It's in that 0 to 5 period too, in what we give to our children, our books. But when the child starts to read, they're putting that empathy to work. And that's part of the circuit. So when I talk about deep reading skills, that the print learner is what I want that print learner to read. And what you, Yunha, and all adults, you did learn that. But your children might not. And this is the point. We have to make sure the children know how to use their background knowledge, use their empathy to take on the perspective of another person's feelings and thinking, because that's going to help them not be susceptible to dis or misinformation. Very, very important point. It also teaches them not to skim, but to read more deeply. So they are giving time for putting all of these processes together for the two last most important ones. Critical analysis. Critical analysis means I am really trying to understand what I am reading, and I am not just accepting it, I'm trying it out. And that's what the brain circuit does. It goes, the frontal lobe is just saying, this is what it's saying. Do I match it with something that is true or false? And you go back and forth. There's this instantaneous hypothesis making. And critical analysis gives that brain the best chance to evaluate truth. Now, in the world we live in, truth is under siege. People are not thinking enough. They're letting the bombardment of information make them go more and more to only a few resources that they then say, oh, they're familiar. They confirm what I think, and therefore it's right. They aren't being critical analytic of that information. They're saying, oh, that sounds like what I know, so I believe it. We human beings must teach our children to be critically analytic. This is one of the most important things we do. Critically analytic and empathic. Empathic not just with the feelings of others, but understanding the thinking of others. Because when you do that, when you take on that other perspective, you're going to see, wait, that perspective is not mine. I have to think why the author is saying that. So we're analytic. And that leads me to the last most beautiful aspect of deep reading, which we want our children to have at that circuit, that deep reading circuit, and that is to think for themselves. They have all this information, and this happens milliseconds, but they have to be taught all from the start. Reading is about making meaning for yourself. What are your insights? What are your reflections? I know you know this, Yunha, but my first book was called Proust and the Squid because Proust said that at the heart of reading, the reader leaves the wisdom of the author behind so as to discover their own. Now, we don't do this all the time, of course not, but deep reading circuitry allows us to do that. And that's what in those first 10 years, we really want strongly understood. We want it built as that circuit. Meanwhile, we are having a child who knows all these things about the digital world, who is complementing what they're learning and how to read with things that enhance their conceptual knowledge and give them a different form of knowledge. Digital knowledge is a beautiful thing. I help build apps for children. I am not anti-technology, but I know what has to be there to be able to use technology wisely. Now, the last part of your question is really, Yunha, for you, me, all adults, all of us. Our deep reading brain isn't being used half of the time when we're on the screen. It's not that we don't have it. It's not that we can't deploy it. It's that we have become skimmers. We really skim what we're given so that the beauty and the precision of language is often lost. Now, there's a really wonderful but eye-opening study of 171,000 subjects. They put all these studies together, comparing print to digital screen. Same story. You read it on print, you read it on the screen, and then you're asked comprehension questions. But that study showed that the young adults who read it in print answered the comprehension questions better. They had more of a sense of the plot, the details. Now, my question and your viewer will be, what about the children right now who are digital natives? Aren't they better on the screen? And so you ask those young adults, you've been growing up with digital technology. What do you think you're better at? And they absolutely say, oh, we're much better on the screen. And you say, why? And they say, because we're faster. Not realizing they are skimming and that they are even worse than the subjects in the 2000 to 2010 period. The ones who are the most recent subjects are worse and they are better in print. Now, what I say to you and your audience is we can't go back. We are all on screens. I'm on a screen to you. But the reality is we have to learn that skimming takes away our ability to really discern the truth and use our critical analysis and use our perspective taking at to the same level as when we are doing it in print. So if it's something important, really important, I urge you to print it out. If it's something important and you can't, I urge you to slow down. Read those words. And if it's something beautiful, regardless of medium, I ask you to enter a dialogue with that author and know that, as Yunhan knows, my first book took me 7 years to write. I chose every word because I wanted to give my readers the best of my thought.
음.
And the idea that now that the screen reader circuit is like zoom, 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 and not giving full time to critical analysis, empathy, and insight.
Yeah, great. Yeah.